right, everyone, welcome back. This is The Last Defense. I'm your host today, DC. Speaking over here to Mr. Mike B across the pond. How are you doing today?
Doing all right. Nice weather indoors.
Bro, okay, yeah, same. So finally hit nighttime over here on this side of the pond, so everything's just coming down to a slow crawl. But yeah, all good. We'll be talking a little bit about a few topics today. I guess you want to go over some of the previous ones that we had discussed about the trilateral partnership in the Middle East. What was specifically on your mind about that?
That's right. Well, first, I want to remind everyone you can find a specific episode that you did on our YouTube channel on this new partnership between Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. And I listened to it today twice before the show just to kind of get myself up to speed. And some takeaway questions that I got from it were, well, first of all, I was surprised and definitely became informed for the first time that you said Turkey has the second strongest military in NATO. So I guess the United States is probably, the first. So that was interesting. And I think the main question, learning that, I think the main question for everyone following the Iran conflict is, how does this change the dynamic now? Because the partnership, in essence, it's an alliance, a protection alliance. So if any one of these three nations gets attacked, presumably by, say, Iran attacking Saudi Arabia, as they have been fighting back and forth as part of this larger war, let's say tomorrow Iran attacks Saudi Arabia again. What happens? Does Turkey get involved immediately? Does that? What about Pakistan? What can they do? I know that's a lot to unravel, but what can you say about that?
Well, the interesting thing about the entire situation with this partnership, so it was actually struck on September 17th, 2025. So that was last year. And this was just a few months after the first 12-month war between, the US and Israel against Iran. And the interesting thing about it was Iran didn't showcase its full military capabilities at the time. So it's important to note that in my personal opinion, Saudi Arabia and Pakistan didn't really see the full capabilities of Iran, and they felt that it would be strategic to form that alliance. They had been in the works of doing that for many years already, because Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, both being Sunni Muslim countries for the majority of the part, they had formed that economic cooperations over like the past 80 years. Now, militarily, they didn't have a full-out defense pact at the time. Now, with things changing in the Middle East and drastically, during 2025, they thought it would be good to go ahead and get things on the defense front as well. However, even though that had been inked, it didn't really do much to help Saudi Arabia. And Pakistan has always been an intermediary, for the Memorandum of Understanding between the United States, Israel, well, to a much lesser degree, Israel, and then also with Iran as well. So they've been trying to get people to come back to the negotiating table. Unfortunately, that's pretty much dead in the water due to, unfortunately, the United States unilateral actions to break the ceasefire just a couple of months ago. So, yeah, it's with Turkey being in there, there is some speculation on my end that potentially that could trigger Article 5, but it beggars belief that, number one, NATO has largely stayed out of the conflict, save for the United States. So you remember back in the day, the only time Article 5 had been triggered was, guess what time?
I'm not sure. When did it happen?
So September 11th.
Oh,
Twin Tower attacks.
Okay. Of course. So Article 5, in essence, is that's like a level of threat. That's like that triggers what response does it trigger?
So Article 5 triggers collective security defense against anyone that attacks one of the NATO member countries. So all of those who are involved in NATO have security alliances with NATO. That would include countries like Norway and Sweden. If one of them is attacked, then all of the countries get involved to help out in that case. So that's precisely what we saw happen with the invasion of Afghanistan and the invasion of Iraq. So that's what they used to go after Saddam Hussein back in the early 2000s, and eventually that led to the overthrow of the Ba'athist regime. Well, wouldn't call it regime, but the government in Iraq. So that created a bit of a sectarian nightmare. Of course, the strange thing about it, if Iraq is normally it's got a sizable Sunni population, but then they also have in the southern parts a strong Shia organization as well, and those are some of the ones that are getting involved in the strikes against Saudi Arabia and in other parts of the conflict. So it's just, as far as Turkey stands, I'm not sure if they would be able to invoke Article 5, but there is the possibility that that could be the case because they are a NATO ally and a NATO member. However, what I noticed during the podcast a couple of days ago is that Turkey's main issue is that Israel could expand its attacks, with Syria and was it Lebanon? They've been going in Lebanon because of Hezbollah. They did a few months ago try to threaten Turkey with attacks, shortly after that, which I think is a very stupid move. Very stupid move if Israel were to do that. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
It sounds like a bunch of high school kids in a cafeteria making like a clique. Remember this, where like they would like make groups, and then like you were with like, I don't know, maybe I have to go further back in high school, like schoolyard stuff. But only instead of fights on the playground, it's tomahawk missiles and freaking nuclear bombs. But again, getting back to Turkey being such a large military, I don't think, I'm looking at a map right now, and if I may screen share, I'm gonna hit screen share right now. Can we see the map that I'm looking at?
Yep.
Hello?
I can see it.
Okay. So Turkey's big. I mean, I'm learning some geography on the fly here. I knew Turkey was big, but it's sizable. Saudi Arabia and Iran are almost the same size. Pakistan. So this essentially surrounds Iran. Each one of these countries has a border. Well, Saudi Arabia, technically they're separated by water, but if I'm Iran, I'm thinking like, okay, these are three nations that surround it. So it's hard not to say there's like some symbol there, that there's not some symbolism there, in that they're surrounded. Now, as you've explained in your podcast and some of it right now, we might not see these nations actually invoke the Article 5, and they might not all start fighting Iran, but at least in a symbolic level, it feels like a ganging up on Iran. So those are my quick thoughts. What about Pakistan? Can you say a little bit about Pakistan? Because they're on the other side, and they have not been involved in the Iran war thus far, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, they're an intermediate group, and essentially what's going on with them is looking at the map that you've got up here. Pakistan is also currently engaging in a war with Afghanistan. So there are some security issues related to that as well. So Pakistan probably does not want to spread itself too thin. It does want to take a diplomatic route to dealing with the conflict and the crisis. It is also the only nuclear capable member of the entire trifecta, if you want to call it that.
Right. But Turkey has some. They just belong to the U.S. Is that correct?
Yeah. They belong to the U.S. They're hosted at the Interlake Air Force Base, and I believe that's somewhere near the southern bit close to Syria. So I was looking at the maps earlier today.
Yeah.
I believe that's where it is located.
Right. Big question. To me, I don't think that any country is going to use nuclear weapons in this conflict. Although I speak in contrast to other voices in the mainstream media that think that there will be potentially, including the president of our country, Trump, on his social media keeps saying we're going to see an attack not since seen in World War II. He's obviously talking about nuclear weapons, because what else could that be? And that's obviously World War II is the last time that we actually saw nuclear weapons used. What do you think on that? Is this a real possibility, or is it just all for show and for posture?
I believe it's for posturing. So Trump has a way of saying things and then recanting on it later. Or, what he was trying to do recently, he said he was going to launch this massive attack on Iran, and then he actually had to stop because CENTCOM pulled him back and said, "Look, shut the fuck up, mate. We don't have the missiles and the weapons to do that." So he's a mouthpiece, but there is a material situation that the US is facing right now. And I had a conversation with a friend of mine as well, about the fact that even if you want to attack someone, you're not the one planning everything. You give the executive order to do it. And unfortunately, Trump does not. I mean, he has the executive order to maybe launch a nuclear missile. However, even if a missile hits, a lot of the assets that Iran has are underground. They're in granite mountains, the Pickaxe Mountains, where a lot of the essentially the production of their weaponry is based. Mm-hmm. This is something for people to think about. Like, even if you were to strike with a nuclear missile, unless you hit a civilian population, which would be a war crime, you're not going to really do much damage. They have been preparing for this for nearly 40 years. They know what the U.S. is capable of. They've studied the wars that the U.S. has launched across the world. And to attack a country you're accusing of building a nuclear bomb, and then later, because you're so desperate in your bid to take control of the Strait of Hormuz, you launch a nuclear attack. Contemplate that just for a little bit, of how insane that is.
It's not, I heard, frankly, he's the one who said it, Alex Jones, like 20 years ago on his show, InfoWars, said he picked the name InfoWars for his website because the military back then considered all win or lose any given conflict is 90% informational and 10% actual physical war. So I think that really applies to this situation and what you just said. Because, if America uses a nuclear bomb after starting a war on the premise of stopping a nuclear bomb, kind of makes you look like a hypocrite. Just saying. So that you don't win that PR war at all. And if 90% of warfare is information and you look like a total hypocrite, you basically lost the war. Doesn't matter what happens next. I mean, you got to have especially this day and age, because we have social media bigger than it's ever been, because you've got X, you've got Facebook, you've got Instagram, you've got all these different websites. Not all of them are censoring everybody like they used to, thank goodness. So we have mass communication, perhaps unseen, at any other point in history. We can actually speak things on Facebook, on X. They're not automatically censored. I'm not saying censorship doesn't still occur, but they're not censored as much as maybe they used to be 5 or 10 years ago. And word gets out quickly. If you go on X right now, you will see opinions about everything, not just what we're talking about today, but opinions about everything. And I do not see the U.S. winning this war from a PR standpoint if they resort to nuclear weapons. I think it's impossible. I think that would be the end of the Trump presidency. It would probably put the Republicans out of power for a very long time. And it would not go good for anybody involved in that decision-making process to initiate a nuclear war. That's my reaction. What are your thoughts?
Let me be as brutally honest as I can be. And I do have a habit of being brutally honest with some people. But okay, so we have currently the inability for the United States to carry out a mission that it said it was only going to last a couple of days, a few days, by decapitating the leadership of Iran. And not only did that backfire, but it emboldened Iran to unleash its full military capabilities. You have no trade going through the Strait of Hormuz right now, which is accounting for 20% of all global trade. 20%. You have no fertilizers coming in. The harvest season is nearing to a close. We're coming into August already, and we're already in August. You have no food security for the United States. You have no trade and no petrochemicals coming into the United States. You have lower and smaller denominations of US dollars being traded in the Strait of Hormuz for petrochemicals and supplies, and the transport fees, which are now being traded in Chinese yuan. So all of these, and then additionally, the infrastructure needed to get things back online are being destroyed. Saudi Aramco, which they had in two places, Jizan and Jabril, I believe that's how you pronounce it. But those two sites have been hit by the Houthi rebel, the Houthi Yemeni rebels. Well, not rebels, they're actually the government. Sorry, I don't want to say it that way. And then on top of that, you don't have the ability to take control of the Strait of Hormuz, so you initiate a blockade miles off the coast from the the exit from the Strait of Hormuz.
My thoughts on all of this were, I thought this was a great segue into the other. So your episode was on this new defense pact between these three nations. My episode was on what's going on with the Trump movement, which you just started to comment on. I thought this could be a great segue. If I may screen share again, I'm going to do that. Screen share. All right. So here is Axios. Can you see? Are you seeing the article?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I did have a read through as well, and I did listen to your podcast the whole way through. So it was some very interesting points there. What I did want to ask you about that is, and this is my point of view, and this is something I've been chatting about, considering the situation in the UK as well, with the way that people vote. They tend to have grandfather claused a lot of the voting. They either vote Labour or they vote Tory based on it. Do you think that Tucker Carlson has a chance to launch a third party and be able to be popular enough to gain significant inroads into Congress, or dare I say, become president of the United States?
Well, I think Congress probably likely. I would be very surprised if he lost an election running just for Congress. I also think he could get the White House, although I'll share a comment. I was working in a restaurant earlier today, and we talk about this stuff in the kitchen. This is our kitchen talk. We talk geopolitics in the kitchen. His first comment to that exact question was essentially, he said, "Oh, they're gonna off him. They're gonna whack him like Charlie Kirk and or JFK or MLK, or take your pick. They'll find a way to get rid of him." I thought, gosh, they're right. They would like to do that, wouldn't they? But then my other thought was, well, maybe Tucker Carlson might be wise enough, having seen all that happen, to maybe not do as many speeches out in big open fields with like barns, hundreds of meters away, or stadiums or college campuses where there's rooftops all over the place. But in any case, politically, if you take all that out of the equation, I think the answer is yes. I think he could win either one. because I think MAGA's frustrated. They don't see Trump as their leader anymore. They feel abandoned by Trump. I look at a lot of what Trump is doing right now, and I would say he doesn't differentiate very much from the Democrat platform of like 2020 or today for that matter. I mean, go down the list. He's done all this quietly. So still on the surface, it looks like he's doing the MAGA stuff, but he's essentially, as I understand it, ended the border enforcement. So we don't have the big waves coming across the border like we did before, but they could if they wanted to now. So that's kind of been unfolded. Obviously, the Iran war goes against the principles of MAGA, which was we weren't going to have these foreign wars, no foreign interference. You can actually get quotes of Trump saying in the debates, I believe it was for the 2016 campaign, his exact words were something like going to war with Iran would be crazy, would be, absolutely nuts. And so that's obviously changed. I could go down the list. He's made huge concessions on his going against big pharma and pushing his new, I don't know if I got the correct title, but his new Department of Health person or appointee is a lady who apparently is a lot more sympathetic to big pharma and their products than MAGA feels comfortable with. I could list 3 or 4 different examples. Well, that was 3 of them right there. I could list a couple more examples, but it feels like Trump, in many ways, as the official founder of MAGA, has largely abandoned MAGA, Make America Great Again. He now wants to make the establishment great again, and that's not what we voted for. So for those reasons, I think that, gosh, isn't that a serious photo? He's like he's like, I mean business.
Yeah,
Anyway.
he means business now, doesn't he?
But there's another great photo, which I shared on my individual podcast, where basically, I have it on my X. I'll just try to bring it up. Anyway, it's the photo of him, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Thomas Massey, Joe Kent, and there's like 2 or 3 other people in the photo who I don't remember who they are. But I thought to myself, that's like the super team. If you want to make an analogy to like the Marvel comics, that's like your Wolverine, Superman, Batman. That's like from the libertarian politics anyway. If you're trying to build like a super team of voices to lead a new party in that realm, those are the people who I would think of first. And he seems to have those people in his corner. He always says on his podcast, I listen to his podcast a lot. He does a great podcast. He used to be #1 in cable news for a reason. He said he does not want to run for president. But I always jokingly say, well, George Washington didn't want to run for president. A lot of people who made great, I always say politics is a kind of irony to it. If you want to be in politics, you're probably doing it for the wrong reasons. If you feel like you have to be in politics, but you don't want to be in politics, you're probably doing it for the right reasons. And the very first president, George Washington, falls in that category. He very much did not want to be the first president. He ended up doing that, obviously. Or he definitely didn't want to be king. Maybe when they changed it to like more of a, republic and democracy, then he relented. But good people generally don't want to be in power. And Tucker Carlson does not want to be in power. At least that's what he says. And I tend to believe him. But he may have to, because I don't know who else could break through the mainstream media barrier. There's not many. I'm trying to think of the names out there. Joe Rogan's got a big name, but he's not. He's kind of like half entertainment, half politics. So that could be an issue. Trying to think who else out there. There's not. I don't think it's a very long list of people. But then you could have a situation where if somebody gets into the debates and then they rise to, because come to think of it, Donald Trump, when he first ran in 2016, even though a lot of people knew who he was, not everybody thought of him as a very political person. And then that obviously changed quickly. So there could be a surprise name in the mix that we're not thinking of right now. But
well, yeah, there was one thing I wanted to add on to that, is that when he was elected, or when he was campaigning for 2016 elections, having that business acumen initially was a lot better than having a career politician like Hillary Clinton or
Right.
or Joe Biden or something like that, because Biden's been in Congress for God knows how long. And the thing was is that they wanted someone who could sort out the economy and the immigration. Those were the two main issues at the time. They're still the current issues. And for a while, I thought that him focusing on the domestic affairs of the United States was the right thing to do. However, we have a lot of issues considering the backlash of some of those policies. Like, for example, the trade tariffs are actually not helping. And what they're doing is they're emboldening China to create its own proprietary technologies. Well, actually, for example, the AI race, of what I've seen is that you have OpenAI and you have Anthropic, who are pretty much out there when it comes to its ability to develop data centers. Microsoft's been doing it for a while. What did China do? It decided it was going to release an open source version of artificial intelligence that you can put on your laptop. So that completely cancels out two of the biggest investments that the United States has had since this AI farce, as I call it, was launched. So it eliminates the need, like Kimi 3, which is the AI model, eliminates the need to use Anthropic or, for example, OpenAI. You don't need a data center. You just need the power on your laptop. Sorry, you're sharing the screen still. Can you stop sharing?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got two faces on there.
Right.
But yeah, like these are some of the things that we have to think about. So Trump had pushed that for a while. He's also pushed trade tariffs, and all it's doing is empowering other countries to create their own technologies. So this is actually eliminating the need for American products. I look at my my place in the UK. I'm no longer seeing Teslas on the road. I'm seeing BYD. I'm seeing Chery. I'm seeing JQ. All of these, Chinese automotives on the road now. This is something that was directly related to the fact that having the trade tariffs imposed onto other countries would just have them seek other solutions elsewhere. Huawei, for example, now has its own 5G chip. May not be the best, but it is getting better. ASML is no longer the main one. Have you know about the situation in Korea, correct? With the stock market. What do you know about that?
I know that they're not happy with the way the elections are being run, but I haven't heard as much about the stock market.
So essentially, the too long didn't read version is that SK Hynix and Samsung are the two largest chip manufacturers
Sure.
in Korea. And their stocks were rising due to the AI wave, the farce, as I call it. And Ed Zitron is an incredible source for that. He works for the Times. Oftentimes he appears on that for their AI report. But he has extensive knowledge on what's going on with the AI industry. And one thing with these two chip manufacturers, their stocks are imploding right now because a lot of the companies are going to Chinese manufacturers. So there's
Is that
one.
because, or go ahead.
Well, they're doing it for several reasons. Lower the cost of chip production, secure the number of chips that can be produced. Because if you're going through China compared to going through Taiwan, Taiwan is having severe shortages in access to certain things. Additionally, you have an abundance of rare earth minerals that you can use to manufacture goods because China controls 93 to 95% of the entire global market, which is another reason why America cannot manufacture its defense weapons because they don't have access to the rare earth minerals. So even if they could expedite the ability to manufacture Tomahawk missiles, Patriot missiles for interceptors, things like that, the THAAD systems, it doesn't have the rare earth minerals that it needs to do that. So consider these things, that this is the position that the United States is in at this point. When it came to the Korean stock market, the stocks began to implode because there was the fear of overinvestment in companies like OpenAI and Anthropic, which have, generally speaking, not produced a profit since they started. So
well, I have some quick questions. So I'm guessing South Korea also doesn't have the same access as China to these rare earth minerals. Is that part of it?
That's a big part of it, because they go through TSMC, which is based in Taiwan, I believe. And the problem with that is Taiwan has been a large staple for the entire global electronics market. But now that there are ways to bypass TSMC and avoid the controls placed on it, you use Apple. I mean, you've used Apple in the past, correct?
Sure.
So now Apple, I know that for a long time, I think even back since like 2022, Apple has been flirting with the idea of using Chinese components. They were using them for their Apple headset that they had created, the Vision Pro, a long time ago, which completely backfired because of the whole metaverse hype. It was the whole metaverse hype. No one wanted to pay $3,000 for an expensive headset with a limited ecosystem of apps. But furthermore, you had.
But that's not to do with where they were getting the chips from. That's just the product itself. You mean did not take off?
The product itself didn't take off, but they were also flirting with the idea of using, screens that they use to see the high resolution material inside the headset. Now with Apple, they're looking at using the chips, the microchips, the processors and things from China, not from South Korea and not from TSMC. So consider what that's going to be if they find a way to circumnavigate these tariffs, because that's what they want to do. What do you think would be the consequence of them being able to strike a partnership with China instead?
We're talking about the U.S. striking partnerships, or are you talking about Apple or these companies?
Apple, definitely.
Yeah. Well, based on just what you said, and I think the quick answer is it would be a great financial benefit to go with who has the best access to resources at the cheap and abundance, which is China. And that's going to be almost like a no-brainer. Which makes me think, as a layperson, stepping back from all this a little bit, I feel like future generations going forward, we really got to get out of this mindset of China versus the US, at least on a military level, because I don't like globalism in the sense of control over every body on the earth by centralized, governments. But I can agree with globalism on this in regards to economy. I think this is the perfect example. China, I'm sure, needs some things from us that they cannot get. I don't know what those are offhand, but there's got to be some things. And obviously, we need these things from them, the rare earth minerals, etc. So I know that's a big topic to throw out there, but this just makes me think we really got to get over the fighting and the military conflicts, because our economies, if we're going to continue to advance and use AI, and by the way, this is probably another big question that could easily divert into a whole other show, but you called several times, you said AI is a farce. Could you give a quick explanation for that? And I'm not disagreeing with it, or necessarily agreeing. I'm still kind of undecided on AI. I see some benefit, I see some concerns, but what is your reasoning for that conclusion?
Okay, so this has been one of my specialities. Like, I love speaking about technology and stuff. So I'll give it a very concise understanding of it. So, um, in just about 5 minutes, AI, as it's marketed today, is a form of a large language model. It's interacting with the human interface through a language model that then processes things based on high probability of output. So essentially, if you ask AI what is going to be the outcome of the US elections, it will use existing data scoured from the internet to create that outcome. So in essence, it's a derivative of artificial intelligence, but there's not an actual reasoning system, especially not for general intelligence. AI is best suited at this particular point in time for narrow tasks and technologies, which is why a lot of people want to take AI and move it to the processing power on a laptop, the same way that if you work for a company that uses AutoCAD, or if you work for a company that is heavily engineering focused, that would be the best type of one that you would have. I know that Windows has a an AI chip that they've been building into their laptops. So that way they can take the processing from the AI data centers and just process it on the laptop instead. So imagine what kind of power that would give. That's the first farce. The fact that people like Sam Altman, as he's being called now, Scam Altman, is like he's advocating for these massive data centers, which use up tons of natural resources. And I'm sure you've heard this in Vermont and places around Missouri and other places in the United States. Using up fresh water, using up power that the power grid cannot afford. And mind you, the world had been focused so heavily on creating green technologies, green energy, and all this other stuff. Now they have just completely thrown that out the window for things that are basically like massive tumors on the face of the planet. I mean, that's what a tumor does. It sucks up all the resources and makes it difficult for the body to function, right? And so that's the other farce, the farce of green technology, or of an imperative to create sustainable green growth. The third thing is the fact that these LLMs do not get information right. They hallucinate constantly. And this is due to the incompatibility with its reasoning capabilities, which are solely dependent on existing information on the internet and its inability to process all of that. So a lot of companies, I speak to, I've spoken to a couple of companies about this issue, and what I've advocated is moving from the what they call frontier models, which is OpenAI, Anthropic, and others that are similar, and move towards the localized versions, which are Kimi and a few others. I know DeepSync is more of a frontier model for China, but Kimi 3, a lot of companies are looking at that. You don't have to pay tokens for each transaction, which is excellent, because what that means is that companies save tons of money. And additionally, they don't run out of tokens. A lot of companies, when they use these frontier models like OpenAI, they run out of tokens in their budget. And they're trying to find ways to get a return on investment for things like OpenAI or Anthropic. And they're using Anthropic specifically for its coding capabilities. It's vibe coding. Vibe coding is when you say, give me a program. Can you write a program that does this and this and this? And then it generates the code. So you've seen Microsoft using quite a lot, and it's actually destroying the company. It's making Windows 11 uninhabitable, inhospitable, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And
are the codes not what they should be had they been made by a human professional?
They are not up to standards. What a lot of big tech companies have done is fired a lot of staff. They replace that staff with AI. They overload the staff with, queries that they need to, do, tasks that they need to do. And they tell them to fill in those tasks. that other people produce with AI. What this does is this overloads the individual worker. Additionally, it produces outputs that actually bloat the technologies and make them unstable. So if you've used Windows 11, like I have a long-standing hatred for Microsoft Windows for the simple reason that it is completely difficult to do things nowadays. There are more crashes, more bugs, more issues. The vibe coding makes it less stable. Microsoft Xbox, I mean, I know both of us, we game with Xbox.
Right.
Okay, they have lost so much now, revenues and other things, because, like, for example, 343 Studios, I'll just do a quick allusion to that. 343 Studios has been vibe coding. Microsoft has been vibe coding a lot of the content for Halo. Halo, the last release that they made, was so bad, involving DEI and involving buggy software, which I actually experienced firsthand playing Halo
Infinite. They got DEI into that thing? Whoa.
Yeah, they got the girl boss thing going for the Halo 1 remake, which has put a lot of people off. Cortana, they're accusing Cortana of being like basically a trans woman due to the change in the appearance. There's a lot of themes that they moved away from the original Halo series, and well, that could be a topic for another day. Definitely, I could just moan and complain about gaming. But long story short, the scam and the farce are those 3 points that I mentioned: green technology, and the kind of like the complete 180 reversal on that. It's the myth of artificial intelligence being AI is actually just an LLM that they're marketing to people as artificial intelligence, when in fact it doesn't have the reasoning capabilities to be able to do certain things the same that a human would reason. And then third is, of course, the return on investment, where they're marketing it to a lot of companies. Companies don't know how to put it into their workflows. And furthermore, we saw with Fable 5 and Mythos 5, which was two Anthropic language models, LLMs, or like AI models, that Trump shut down briefly because they didn't want people who were outside of the country to have access to it, or people who are not nationals. So what that did is that could damage a company's workflows. If you get a frontier model and you integrate it into your workflow of how you do your work, your assignments and tasks, and then that's pulled away from you, just imagine what that's going to do to a massive company.
Right.
So those are the things.
I just want to make a quick commentary on AI from a journalist perspective. I think you said something about AI can be good at looking at narrow, small tasks, but when it gets to broader tasks, it's looking at so much information it can be misled and or get bad results. Is that somewhat true?
So, long story short, there was a great book called Life 3.0. I forget the author's name at this point because I'm terrible with names. So forgive me, author, for that. But there are 3 stages of artificial intelligence. There's artificial narrow intelligence, which is what we're dealing with now. Doing narrow tasks, excuse me, centrally focused on completing a specific task. There's artificial general intelligence, where it gets into reasoning capabilities that map the human brain, or that mimic the human brain. And then there's artificial super intelligence later on. We're currently trying to understand how to use artificial narrow intelligence. For the type of compute that we have right now, what companies like OpenAI and Anthropic and all of them, they want to build artificial general intelligence, where they're smart enough to reason on their own. which is going to be difficult considering the resource intensive investment that they need to put in there and the lack of return on investment that they're receiving from their client base. So a company that's trying to OpenAI is trying to get $1 trillion initial public offering, so they refer to it as an IPO. And the problem with doing that is that if they can't get the revenues that they need to pay that off or to generate enough investment and revenues to make that money back, no one's going to want to invest in it. So they've actually had to delay that because the tasks that they're suited to do are not using the right architecture. If you had just an AI chip in your laptop and you had an open source AI model integrated into your laptop or into an interface, you generate way more security for your company. So for example, nothing's on a cloud server, nothing's in a data center hundreds of miles away. So everything you need is within the reach of your own company, your own IT architecture. And generally speaking, you can customize it to do whatever you want. You don't have to go through Anthropic or OpenAI to say, okay, can you do this? Can you produce this for me? That's what we're looking at.
So my experience as a journalist is AI is great at summarizing like a meeting, like if a committee meeting at the State House, let's say they're talking about green energy, they have a 45-minute discussion, 2 or 3 people talk, they go over the pros and cons of industrial scale wind turbines. I could easily talk about that subject for an hour, but the AI could do a good job of narrowing down everything that was said, in essence, not, every detail, but in essence, into like a page-long paragraph, 2 to 3, 400 words, 500 words. And I literally know news websites in Vermont currently that are running. I don't know if I don't want to name them offhand because I don't want to put them on the spot, but there are news websites in Vermont that currently run as single staff, meaning they have an editor and they use AI in this way. And it actually does work efficiently for summarizing like a meeting. However, where it can go sideways, let's say you want AI's opinion about industrial scale wind turbines in general, meaning outside of the confines of that 45-minute meeting. Well, now the AI is looking at the whole internet, not just these few people talking in a meeting. And they're going to see everything that was ever written about industrial scale wind turbines. Well, you think, well, that should be great. It'll get all the information. It'll be super accurate. Not necessarily. The very nature of the internet is full of investors and conflicts of interest and media companies putting spins on different topics that might not always be the most accurate information for the public. So sticking to the example of industrial scale wind turbines, there's a lot of media out there saying they're great, they're wonderful, they're wind power, it's power from the wind, it's great for the earth, blah, blah, blah. But there's probably in the alternative media, a smaller window of the internet, there's going to be, well, actually, the power is really expensive. Actually, bears, animals, humans cannot live within 2 or 3 miles of these things, or they get these different vibrations in their bones, literally vibrations in their bones from these things. They're incredibly expensive to make. They're incredibly expensive to take down. There's all the energy is horribly inefficient. But that's a smaller window of the larger internet because maybe alternative media is growing, but AI is looking at everything, and you might not necessarily get accurate information if you're letting AI look at everything. Because it's my experience with AI has been it will generally parrot back the mainstream view of whatever subject that you're looking at. Not always. I think it's getting better year over year, but that's been my general experience with it. So again, small meeting, 45 minutes, couple people talk, they say X, Y, and Z. The AI, in my experience, is good, even great, at efficiently, concisely repeating that back to you. Looking at the entire web of the internet and all the information on a particular subject, you could get any number of results, which may or may not be actually very accurate. or good for people to be hearing. So has that been your experience with journalism and AI, or do you have any comments on that?
Well, there's a couple of the companies that I'm aware that use artificial intelligence. You have Reuters, for example, produce a lot of their wire services using AI. Bloomberg, I know, has an AI as well.
Mm.
I don't really know outside of that, but a lot of them are integrating to a degree AI in order to create press releases. They're using it to create breaking news based on existing information or information in a specific database. So, like, say, for example, Reuters has a few wire quotes or things that it has produced from a meeting. So, for example, Trump makes a statement, and there are 3 or 4 different quotes that people have taken and put into the Reuters database. It could then take those 4 quotes and then generate an article based on that. And then it could keep the article updated in real time as new quotes are released based on what's in the system of Reuters at the time. So what AI is important about, it's got to produce a specific function that creates a return on investment. Why are we using this product? And then why is it beneficial to our company? Like, are we generating more revenue for the company? Do we need fewer people as a result of that? Or are we constantly checking and having to validate the information that has been produced by these AI models, which in turn creates more people that have to kind of service the solution? So the main thing is, do we need to keep hiring new people to make sure that the thing's not cocking up the entire time?
Mhm.
Or do we just have people do their jobs? So wages
Right.
are always the highest expense in any company. And that is the reason why they fire people, and they try to replace them and then offset the previous workload onto the existing people. And then they may hire one person
But the
to double
theory is
check.
AI will fill in the gaps. That's why they fired him, right? Isn't that the logic behind it? Whether it turns out that way or not.
That's part of it, definitely. And they want to say that AI has been leading to the fact that a lot of people have been fired. A lot of it just has to do with the fact that these companies have completely overplayed their hand with the types of investment that they have made into AI. So there are oftentimes a lot of these companies are going broke because they're not seeing a return on investment. So they fire people so that they can balance out their quarterly reports. So they say, we've generated this amount of revenue, but what they do is they don't take into effect that they saved $1 million, quid or $1 million because they no longer have those people on the payroll. So that's what it's all about. It's a really corrupt business strategy.
I'm just trying to think of the train of thought of this episode, which has been fascinating. But I'm trying to think. We started about an alliance of 3 nations in the Middle East. We started talking about how that relates to politics back home in America, or my home. You're in England, but even though you have your family in America too. But in any case, we talked about how that relates back to America, and then we dovetailed into AI, and they're all related. So I mean that this in a positive way. I think it's a fascinating string of thought. But how does this go back? Let's take one step back and go back to what's going on in America. The war in Iran, these new alliances in the Middle East, AI. Where is American politics going in the middle of all this? And because the conversation that led to AI was we were talking about new political parties in the U.S. Will Tucker Carlson start one? Will somebody else start one? How? I know it's hard to put a neat bow on all these different topics, but how? I think one way to kind of put it all in perspective is how does this play out in potential new parties in America or elsewhere for that matter? Maybe there's new parties in England.
Yeah, we could definitely have an entire show dedicated to the chaos that has erupted in England. But speaking solely on the United States, I think personally the US is in kind of a bit of a, dare I use the word, a bit of a capitalist crisis. It doesn't know exactly what it's going to be producing. A lot of the kind of policies that it set about are backfiring. A lot of the issues in the Strait of Hormuz are not going according to plan, and it's actually deeply endangered. It's created a huge capitalist crisis in the United States. It needs to kind of get back to its center. If it's going to take if it is going to take the capitalist route in the sense of producing products that work, allowing people to make money and to proceed building, their own livelihoods, in a more laissez-faire sense. What America needs to do is, I would honestly say, stop trying to project an air of superiority worldwide and focus on the charity that belongs at home. Once they can get those things sorted out, strengthening border security, getting back to producing products that are not being hyper evaluated in their IPOs or in their evaluations, or their valuations, sorry. And then just getting to a bit more common sense type of politics and economics, I think they'll be a lot better off than the current state of affairs now, because we do see that the Trump administration is greatly compromised. We do see also that there's a significant war in the Middle East that is not going away anytime soon, and that Trump has no control over. And I think with the products and the ability to produce goods needs to be centered around what people want. I think Apple's doing the right thing by going towards this kind of path and just kind of staying straight and narrow by producing stuff that people like. I think the Apple products are pretty nice. I had my one beef with them after they phased me out after 7 years, but I mean, we're always forgiven because they're making good stuff. And just understanding where America is going to sit in the next 50 years, because it may not sit at the head of the table, but at least everyone that eats at the table will be happy with what they're sharing together. So that's my take on it. I mean, what's yours?
Sorry, I had myself on mute. All right, I'm going to go back to screen sharing for a second here. All right. So here's the Axios article again. There's serious looking Tucker. I'm looking at, these are the 10 principles, and we don't have to go through all of them because, there's, 10 of them. But just thinking about number 3, productive. America should rebuild farming, manufacturing, craftsmanship while rejecting an economy dominated by finance, real estate speculation, surveillance systems, and weapons. So I read that as a layperson as America should focus on America and its people. So farming, manufacturing, craftsmanship. Stop getting involved in other crap. Again, not being a professional economist, when I think of the word economy and a healthy economy, I think of people producing actual physical goods and or actual physical services. And a lot of that needs to be done. If you drive around Vermont on our dirt and or paved roads right now, they need some work. It's hard to drive around and not mess up your car in short order because the roads kind of suck. That requires physical human labor. The AI robots, I think, got a long way to go before they can take over those jobs. Might happen one day, maybe in our lifetime, maybe not, but we're not there yet. Let's just say AI does take over a bunch of different jobs. Well, we still need arts. We still need performers. We still need, I think that one of the good things about capitalism is it has a sort of natural built-in tendency to send people to what we actually need. And if we don't need people to sit in cubicles anymore and run spreadsheets and type software, maybe some of that's a good thing. Although it sounds like, based on what you said, there are some kinks that need to be worked out of that too before we fully embrace AI taking over those things. But I in my inner fundamental politics, economy, feel like capitalism finds a way, healthy capitalism finds a way to work itself out. I know capitalism can and does go sideways, but if you have free, independent media, which we are, if you have people who are informed, capitalism requires an educated public. People forget that. You can't just have a bunch of knuckleheads running around voting for the stupidest thing they just heard on, some advertisement in the corner of the internet. It's not going to work. I mean, it's not going to work well, I should say. But if we can stay educated and smart, and maybe, I don't know if Tucker Carlson's the answer, but I think he's onto something by going back to principles. Fair, sovereign, productive. Beautiful. That's an interesting one. Not a lot of people talk about how ugly some of the modern buildings can be. Healthy. That's a big one. Honest, optimistic, wise. Yeah, we need real schools. I'm obviously skimming through them quickly, but decent, united. Some of these are kind of abstract, but take what you will from them. What do you think? Do you think Tucker's 10 principles are onto something, or do we need somebody else to lead us in a new direction? Somebody needs to lead us in a new direction, right? I mean, MAGA's clearly been abandoned. Trump is off the rails. The Democrat Party in the US is still kind of stuck in a lot of its bad ideas from 5 years ago and 10 years ago, I feel like. What do we do? What do you think we do?
Yeah, I'm looking at the point 10. It's kind of a bit all over the place. You say Carlson called for halting immigration until the effects of AI become clear. And then until the effects of AI become clear. I'm not sure why he put that in there. I would just say its effects become clear, ending benefits for undocumented migrants and make English the sole language. Yeah. So, I mean, generally, he makes good points. They would be good as a policy. So we have Restore UK in United Kingdom, mostly an English led kind of political party, and it cites a lot of these similar types of common sense policies, which I do quite enjoy. Now, one thing you would have to do, I mean, this is kind of like a skeleton of his ideology that he would like to see become commonplace and executable once he were to come into power. I think that generally, if he does the research, he may be able to generate ways to actually implement these 10 policies. So this is, again, kind of like a loose understanding of what he wants, which is great. It's kind of like a brainstorming, but then you have to flesh it out by elaborating, extrapolating from different points, conducting the research as to the feasibility of how these 10 points could go into play. Like, I know that Restore Britain has had quite a few of these same policies, and they have full white papers for each of the different policies that they create. So that's actually bringing a lot of clarity into the matter. So, I mean, I wish Tucker Carlson the best of luck if he decides to go this route, and hopefully he can make, America first a viable solution for the United States rather than focusing on hegemonic or hegemonic, like, kind of projection to the outside world. I mean, we're both Americans. I mean, and when I see the way that America has evolved over the years, there were some good things and bad things about Trump, but at least he tried to get things on the right path initially. But after the whole Epstein files thing came out, I just think his mind just got focused on other things. I think he just needed a distraction from having to release those papers.
Yeah. Some people think that the assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania, could have been, for lack of a better phrase, like his Reagan shooting moment. I don't know if you've ever heard the urban legend. I don't know if this is true or not, but when Reagan was shot, they rushed him into a car. They shut the door. Somebody from the driver's seat or the front seat turned around and basically said, "We can go to the hospital or the morgue." And that was their way of saying, like, you're going to do things our way from now on, or you're not going to do things at all. And if you look at some of the later policies of the Reagan administration, they weren't very.
One thing, is it okay if you can stop the sharing the screen? Because you got
oh sorry, yes,
infinity window.
Stop sharing.
Going.
Okay. In any case, so in essence, a lot of people think that after that assassination attempt of Reagan, some of his policies went sideways. I think the liability protection for pharmaceutical companies for some of their products, including vaccinations, came after the assassination attempt. And there are probably some other, I was only a kid, a child in like elementary school when Reagan was president. So I'm not as familiar with his policies as I am with Trump's, but it does feel like after definitely second term compared to first term, people voted for Trump again for a reason. They probably voted for him in 2020 as well, but that's a whole other tangent. But in any case, they voted for him again, and we did not get the same policies. We got policies that were very un-MAGA-like. So I don't know what the reason is. Maybe the assassination attempts against his life were part of that. Maybe he's just getting old and getting, what do you call it, dementia. Maybe it's a combination of all those things. But for whatever the reason, we're not getting what we voted for. That's all we really need to know.
Yeah, good points on that. Good thoughts. Anyways, we're going to end it on that note. Gone over to about 1 hour 17 minutes. It's been quite a very, very interesting conversation. I love that free flow of ideas and thoughts. But yeah, once again, it's The Last Defense. It's DC, your host here, and Mike B, chatting about all of the things going on in the state of affairs these days. If you like, again, what you see here, please like, share, subscribe, leave your comments below. Feel free to, spark up some conversation about what you think's taking place in America and United Kingdom if you live here as well. And yeah, we're going to leave it at that. Thank you so much, everyone. Till next time, we will see you around. Speak your mind, defend the truth, and keep your sanity. Take care, everyone.
Cheers.